everyone, and welcome to dLocal Insights, the dLocal Investor Relations podcast. I'm Chris Strohmeyer, Senior Vice President of Corporate Development at dLocal, where I lead strategy, corp dev, and investor relations. Today, we're tackling a topic that sits at the very core of what makes dLocal different. Trust, compliance, and the regulatory infrastructure that powers our ability to operate at scale across some of the world's most complex markets. And joining me today is Gabby Vera, our Chief Legal and Compliance Officer. Gabby leads all things regulatory, compliance, and legal at dLocal. She's been with dLocal since 2021, is one of my favorite people to work with. And Gabby, it's really wonderful to have you here with us today.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
No, of course. This podcast is in part about our investor community getting to know our management team better. So that's where I wanted to start with you. You have a PhD in international law, and you've built a career in payments and in financial services. You joined us at dLocal in 2021 for acquisition of PrimeiroPay, a cross-border payments company. So just tell us a little bit about your story and your journey to dLocal.
Absolutely. So as you said, my background is in law, and I did my master and my PhD in international law. I wanted to be able to reach to further jurisdictions and also be able to experience different type of regulatory frameworks. And that it's my first, let's say, step into what would be the career that I have been building. What happened, and actually it was very interesting because it was not very planned. I ended up in the payment segment and I fell in love with it. Part of it is exactly because of the complexity that we handle. It's the fact that every single transaction, it touches multiple countries, and that means we need to understand, comply, and also simplify for our merchants, right? In the end, all of the governance and the framework that it goes around that one single transaction. So when I joined PrimeiroPay, it was a startup, early days, and that allowed me to not only grow and develop and settle the compliance and legal departments there, but I also was participating in sales pitch or conversation with banks. So I had a little bit of a taste of other areas. I actually moved to Mexico back then to also start the expansion in Mexico. And I think that experience was super valuable. Like I definitely shaped how I see things. And I saw how compliance, how regulatory, how legal can actually unblock business and be a competitive advantage. Moving forward, when it was early 2021, we were in discussions with dLocal, and dLocal acquired PrimeiroPay. And I was very, very, very happy to be offered a position to be leading back in that time the regulatory and the compliance team. 1 year later, I also took the legal team. And yes, it has been incredible journey. I was amazed by the ambition of the founders and how much they achieved in such a short time and in such complex markets. So I was very excited to join, and I continue to be very excited every day because there's no one day that is the same.
For sure. It's been a remarkable journey, and I want to come back to that actually towards the end. But getting into kind of the theme of today's episode, right? When investors hear the word governance, and we hear this from the IR team the entire time, they sometimes think of checkbox compliance, right? Necessary, but not a source of competitive edge. We talk about it very different internally and how we talk about it to the market as well. So super simply, why is governance a strategic advantage for dLocal and not just a regulatory requirement?
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. I hear that a lot, to be honest. I think for some folks, it's probably not that tangible. Governance, it's a very broad definition. And also historically, compliance has been treated as a cost center, as you said, like a check and box exercise. Um, I think dLocal have rejected that notion since day one, but I also see that shift market-wise, where people like players, regulators, merchants, they are starting to see having a robust compliance and regulatory function can actually allow more business and in a sustainable and a scalable manner. So yeah, when I think about our merchants' perspective, what I think it's interesting is that when I talk to them directly, I see that what they are concerned when they start operating, they often their products on emerging markets. And very often those emerging markets are very far and very different framework of the ones they're using in their home country, is the regulatory risk. They want to know that their partner is licensed. They want to know that the partner can actually process those transactions in a way that is compliant with local laws and regulations. They want to access that market. They don't want any trouble with the regulators or with any local authorities. And in emerging markets where changes are constant, maintaining those relationships and keeping the right licenses throughout time when there is new regulations being enacted all the time, it's really tough. So that's what we are actually doing from dLocal as a whole, is getting that complexity, and dealing ourselves with all the local complexity, but allowing the merchant to access that consumer base. And without those licenses, without that robust compliance framework, we wouldn't be able to do so. So that's why we see that building trust, not only with our merchants, but also with local regulators that allow us to have a more robust product, and even giving us some early visibility into market changes. That we become a partner to the regulator, just that a passive observant.
And so speaking about regulators, right? You work closely with them every day, be that in Brazil, in Argentina, in Nigeria, in Egypt, in South Africa, in Malaysia. What do they take us behind the hood a little bit? What are they actually thinking about when they think about a cross-border payments company like dLocal?
It's very interesting because we do see some trends in different regions. But one thing they all have in common, I would say, is like they're all concerned about financial crime prevention, for example. They want to make sure that the funds are flowing through our pipes, but also the entire financial infrastructure in their country, they are legitimate. So they care a lot about how we monitor our transactions, who are our clients, and what is the purpose behind those payments. Another thing they care a lot about is protecting, of course, their population. And that means allowing financial inclusion, but also consumer protection, and making sure that, of course, the users that are accessing those financial products, they're being treated fairly. And last but really not least is the systemic stability, and that goes from cybersecurity and infrastructure, but also financially robustness of the company that is actually being a part of their system. It's very interesting because in some talks with regulators, I heard directly them saying, look, we now have a very generous competitive landscape. We now have a lot of companies that are already licensed and ready to operate. We want to make sure that those companies, they are sound financially and they're not going to present a systemic risk for their countries. So that's I would say I see those trends across, but it's interesting because the regulation might start for payments from different angles. Some of them actually start from those AML concerns, as I was saying, and then later developing to a more detailed payment service type of regulation.
Yeah. And you mentioned this already, but sometimes, the way that regulation gets typified is for the licenses, right? And we've very consistently and intentionally have been growing our license portfolio. And I think it's one of the most powerful but least appreciated parts of our story. But it's a huge part of your day-to-day, right? We now hold 37 licenses and authorizations across 26 markets. And as we disclosed recently, have 16 more applications in process.
Mm-hmm.
Why does this actually matter?
And I must say we have 16 applications in process and 17 in a pre-application stage being prepared. So I think that
it's day-to-day continuous work. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And what I think is that our license portfolio fundamentally defines the products we can offer and the merchants we can serve. If we do have a client that is a money remittance company and they want to do business in a country that they are not present, a lot of the regulatory burden will follow on us as being the last mile in that country and processing funds and collecting funds locally. So what perhaps people don't see is all of the nuances that we have for our product portfolio. There are countries that a pay-in requires a license different from a payout. There are countries that the local to local is one license and the cross-border is a different one. There are countries that, in added to that mix, you're going to have, okay, but is it a pay-in cross-border of a money remittance company? That's a different license of registration. So we continue to invest on those licenses. And in the countries where what we do might not be set clear, we work with the regulator showing what we do and also sharing our experience in other countries because even though each country is a different reality and each country has their own complexity, there are something that can be translated from those experience. And I think we got pretty good in understanding how to apply for a license, what type of information the regulator wants to have. We lead with transparency, we lead with proactiveness in that relationship, and we have seen that is something that it has been consistently valued by regulators. So it's a lot of hard work that maybe it's not, it doesn't transpire so much, but I think it's the core and the base of everything we do.
Yeah, agreed. And I think a great example of just the complexity we abstract for merchants. It's not just a license or authorization per country, as you were mentioning. It depends on the type of flow, sometimes the type of merchant, etc. We were just talking a lot about kind of licenses in emerging markets where we operate, right? But a common question we get as well is, why are you also licensed, or why do you want to or need to be licensed in developed markets where many of our merchants sit, right? And we have a UK FCA license. We're pursuing licenses in some US states. What does that actually unlock for our business?
Yeah, I think, and that goes to what I was saying in the beginning, why I'm so fascinated about this payment environment, which is one transaction touching multiple jurisdictions. The way we approach to that is we will check what licenses are required in every part of that transaction life. So we talked about emerging markets and the license we have there. Why? Because that's where the user is. That's where we do the pay-ins and the disbursements, the payouts. But then you need to ask, yourself, what are the licenses that we need in the country we are incorporated, and where our merchants are, right? So it has two directions, right? It's the users and the merchants, and those are the two parties we are connecting. So by having a license in the UK, we are able to serve all of the fintechs and all of the business there that they want to reach users outside United Kingdom. Same thing for the US. In the US, it's more also about making our solution more robust and being able to be more active in the country, even though, again, the users are outside the country. So we don't get those licenses with the intention of processing for end users in UK or in the US, but it is to connect the merchants that might be there to the users that are in the emerging market. And that's how we always think. We always think regulatory in dLocal. We see a threefold: where the users are, where we are, where our merchant is. And that's what defines the next place that we are seeking for a license.
To me, every license in the end raises the bar for us, right? And since we're serving some of the most successful, best, largest companies in the world, they have extremely high bar for us. And the license in some way is trying to meet, often exceed that bar. Shifting gears here. Yeah, go ahead. You want to say something?
No, I was just going to say that I agree. I think what a lot of merchants also look for is to have a payment partner that is closer to their own regulatory framework and use courts and etc. that they are accustomed to. So when we are working with a leading company on streaming, for example, they wouldn't necessarily want to have a contract with us with a local law that they don't have experience. So that's how we bridge that gap, right? So that's how and why we also decide to have what we call our opcos in those countries, in the UK, in Europe, in the US, in Singapore. It's in order to also be present there and talk to them, and they feel they are hiring a payment provider, a partner that is very close to them, but with an outreach that they don't need to be concerned about. So I completely agree with you.
So shifting gears a little bit now to a topic that's top of mind for us, for investors, for the entire world, which is AI, right? We've been investing heavily in AI across our business, and your functions in compliance and legal are no exception. Actually, I think it's some of the functions where we spend some of the deepest thinking about how we can best apply AI. So I want to engage you a little bit on that. How is AI actually changing the way that dLocal does compliance and does its risk operations day to day?
Yeah. I think this is one of the topics I'm very excited about at the moment. I not only because of efficiency and of course being able to scale, and those things by itself they are super important, but it also means having consistency across the globe. Like right now my team is spread across so many different countries. All of those countries we have license and registrations. We need to have a compliance team or a compliance officer, and that of course that local knowledge is very important. We never want to lose that because they know the reality of the country they're in. They know what is the right risk and the right risk-based approach to problems. But it's also so important to maintain the high standard we want to have from a global perspective, and AI help us with that. It help us with connecting all of the data we have internally, making suggestions, and making sure that we are being consistent across the globe. And also interconnecting data from different countries, because again, we might have we might have connections with a transaction process in Brazil with another process in Mexico. We have seen that in our platform. Sometimes the same user. And even though it sounds, okay, that's not, of course, not going to be the norm, but we do encounter in those cases where we might see a movement of funds for the same over in different countries. So we can learn from that. We can even understand what is the behavior of that user. Without AI, that would mean a team in Brazil, a team in Mexico, they're not necessarily going to pick up that level of detail. So I think these allow us to leverage the data we have in another level. But again, I want to go back to the efficiency and the scalability of what we can do. Like I see with a very short time, we decrease a lot our SLAs and a lot of the things that we need to handle in compliance. So we currently have a pre-transaction monitoring, a post-transaction monitor. I don't want to get too technical, but when we do that means pre-transaction monitoring. That means a transaction might get on hold. If I use AI, I might have that transaction released much quicker, in matters of minutes or seconds, instead of having the amount of hours that a manual process would require. So that also means we are serving our clients better. And we are making sure that the user in the emerging market are also receiving their funds or making their payment quicker. So that is game changer. It changes everything. Like I could spend hours talking about this. It's a topic that I'm very excited.
No, and I think what's really interesting here is, right, AI can't replicate what we do just out of the box. It's a conversation we have with investors all the time because we touch real money for regulatory rails, as you were talking about, in licensed entities across emerging markets. But it allows us to do so much more as a platform and serve our merchants in a more efficient and in a better way, right?
And the regulations are here to stay and to even keep deepening. So the regulator would like to have the people in the ground, as we were saying, so they can talk about it and explain. So yes, we still need to translate all of the AI model and all of the AI operational work to the regulator. And by the way, that is not an easy task, because it's translating to them into perhaps a language that is more familiar to them, something that is super new, and that we still see some places in the world that hasn't adopted as much as we had, and also other players didn't adhere as deep as we have. But yeah, but I completely agree with you. It doesn't replace at all what we do.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to quickly touch on is something that we actually announced this week. We've been working on for a long time, which is our full stablecoin suite, which we're calling Stablecoin Full, which allows our merchants to operate with stablecoins from a treasury perspective, from an on and off ramp perspective, and as well as if consumers want to be paid in or want to pay or receive a payout in stablecoins, right? And when we announced it, we made compliance actually a big part of how we differentiate ourselves. How are you seeing the regulatory environment around stablecoins evolving, and what do we as dLocal, with our compliance capabilities, offer merchants who want to operate with stablecoins?
So it's interesting because we are seeing the change in regulation being so fast. We did an analysis not that long ago, and we reanalyzed the jurisdictions we are in, and you can see how quickly the regulation changes. So that's very interesting. So one thing is we definitely need to keep an eye on how regulation around stablecoins and crypto in general is evolving on countries. And we notice generally there is a tendency to have a higher regulatory framework for payings rather than payouts. The payouts is just for stablecoins and crypto in general. It's very difficult to also connect the geography of the user to the transaction they're moving. There is that extraterritorial component that it's more difficult to be very clear under a specific country regulatory framework. On the other side, in the paying side, the connection with the user is stronger. And there is a lot of regulation. We see that also in Latin America a lot about being able to capture funds from end users. And that translates also to the crypto stable world, in the sense that those regulations for fiat, they're trying to somewhat, that not the regulation itself, but the underlying trend of protection of capturing funds of end users trying to be replicated for also payings on stablecoins. So that's interesting. The other thing that I was very surprised is some countries, they are very crypto friendly. But then for stablecoins, they're not that friendly because they see crypto more as an investment and the stable more as perhaps a real treasury tool. And if they have concerns about FX controls and etc., they'll be more conservative with stable coins and less so with crypto. So it's interesting. You really need to deep dive in each country and understand what is the concern the regulator is trying to tackle, and that you're going to start seeing some trends on how they're approaching it.
Yeah. Another example of complexity, right? Stablecoins might allow money to move faster, but it's not necessarily less complex than the world we had before they started being used. Two more questions, Gabby. The first is kind of to bring everything together. And we've talked about a lot of things: licenses, regulatory relationships, AI. If we zoom out a little bit and put it all together, I think about something you already mentioned, which is just trust, right? How does everything we do translate into trust and ultimately serving our global merchants in the best way that we can?
For me, I think that in terms of compounding, every license we add and we expand, it generates new products. It allows us to access new markets and new segments of merchants that we can serve. So every relationship we deepen with the regulator, it also allows us to move faster in that market with higher intelligence and also in a smoother way as well. So everything ties together in the end. A new product also might be a good way to start a conversation with a regulator about innovation in the country and then become closer to them. So it's really so interconnected that I think that this demands us, and I think that makes our job very interesting, which is we do need to keep moving fast and in a lot of different directions, but of course with the unity and with that alignment that we have been doing. So that in general, it's, I think, a very interesting work and interesting day to day to have.
No, your seat is fascinating. And the other interesting thing about you at the company is that you're one of the longest tenured members of the management team. You joined us, as you mentioned, right after dLocal's IPO in 2021. We're now 5 years almost since the IPO, almost 5 years since you joined. Give us a little bit of a longer term view. How have you seen dLocal evolve?
It's super interesting because I have seen companies starting more or less in the same time as dLocal, but still, uh, it's remarkable the amount of countries we are in, the amount of payment methods we can offer, and we really reach countries that, at least when I joined, I thought, okay, this is really a 5 year plan, and it was like a 1 year plan. Like the next year, we were already there. Um, so for me, I saw a big difference in a lot of aspects. I think the ambition, as I was saying, of the founders and going very, very deep in different territories and being close to the clients, that allowed us to have um, a very clear vision of what we wanted for the company. But also at the same time, since IPO, I have seen how much we grew in terms of other areas, right? So my area, I think, is a good example of that. I think we added so much tool, so much intelligence on what means a compliance function. The regulatory team has been remarkable as well. The amount of licenses we were able to achieve in such short period of time. And even it's interesting, like I also see when I joined, I think to get a new license probably take 2 to 3 years. Nowadays, we are able to get a very complex license in 6 months sometimes because of how the kind of the toolkits that we were able to generate. I I'm super appreciative of my journey here. I think I grew a lot. I had exposure to so many different situations. Um, that for me professionally has been definitely life changing. But also, I think that working together with the people that we do, it's amazing. Like since I joined, I have been fascinated by the talent, and by the obsession. Like I feel that like people are very obsessed for the problems they're trying to solve. Um, and it's that means that this is a really 24 hours type of work, and but for me that just adds to the how interesting it is to work here. So I'm very thankful for my colleagues, my bosses, current and past, and my team as well. My team is amazing. They're the ones doing the heavy lifting, and for me it's nothing better than that they buy some of my crazy ideas, or and vice versa, I also buy some of the crazy ideas. um, and being able to really see through life, like the projects we start, we really see very quickly like how we start, how it grows, and how it deploys. That feeling, it's really remarkable. So I'm just more excited for what's to come, based on my experience in the past.
Yeah. No, it's really I'm reaching a year at dLocal, and I never cease to be amazed just how quickly we're growing and the opportunities and challenges that come with that. But it's a privilege to be a part of. Well, Gabby, thank you. This was really, really fantastic. Thanks for giving us your time and for
Thank
giving
you.
everyone a clear window into something I think is more difficult to understand about dLocal, but always comes back in the end about how we create trust with merchants, with regulators, and with other stakeholders as we build a really long-term and differentiated business. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us for episode 2 of dLocal Insights. We hope that we gave you a deeper view into the infrastructure behind every transaction that dLocal processes, and that you got to know Gabby a little bit better. We'll continue to use this podcast to go beyond the numbers and give you an inside view into how we think and operate. We have some exciting things in the pipeline, so stay tuned for more conversations.